She was just a stranger, soaked and trembling in the rain, standing barefoot on the side of a deserted Montana highway. No ID, no memory, no voice. Just desperate eyes that seemed to search for something she couldn't name. What no one knew, not even her, was that she had vanished years earlier from one of Cedar Falls' most prominent families. If you love stories about second chances, lost memories, and the kind of healing that can only come from unexpected family bonds, you're in the right place. Stay with us as we uncover one of the most emotional journeys we've ever shared. A story that proves sometimes the greatest discoveries happen when we open our hearts to strangers who need us most. The November wind cut through the Montana valleys like a blade, carrying with it the promise of the season's first heavy snow. Jack Morrison gripped the steering wheel of his weathered pickup F-150 as raindrops hammered against the windshield in a relentless rhythm. The wipers struggled against the downpour, creating streaks that distorted the empty highway ahead. He was heading home after a long day fixing heating systems, winter prep jobs that kept food on the table for him and his 10-year-old daughter, Jessica. The radio crackled with static, a weather alert warning of dropping temperatures. Jack reached forward to adjust the volume when his headlights caught something that made his heart skip. A figure stood motionless on the shoulder of the road, barely visible through the sheets of rain. He hit the brakes, the F-150 sliding slightly on the wet asphalt before coming to a complete stop. Through the blurred windshield he could make out a woman. She was thin, pale, wearing what looked like a summer dress completely inadequate for the near-freezing weather. Her long brown hair was plastered to her face and shoulders. Her feet were bare and she stood perfectly still as if she'd given up on the idea of moving altogether. Jack threw the F-150 into park and grabbed his flashlight from the glove compartment. The cold air hit him like a physical blow as he stepped out into the storm. "Ma'am," he called, his voice nearly lost in the wind. "Are you okay?" She didn't respond. As he approached, flashlight beam steady but not blinding, he could see her more clearly. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with exhaustion etched into every line of her face. Her arms hung limply at her sides and her eyes, wide and unfocused, seemed to look right through him. "Hey," Jack said more gently, stopping a few feet away. "You're going to freeze out here. Are you hurt?" The woman's lips moved but no sound came out. She tried again, pointing frantically at her throat, then made writing motions with her hand. Jack's heart sank. She couldn't speak. Okay, he said, pulling out his phone. The screen showed no signal. They were in one of those dead zones that peppered the Montana highways. "Listen, I can't leave you here. My F-150's warm and I've got a daughter at home. We'll figure this out together, all right?" The woman hesitated, scanning his face with those searching eyes. Finally she nodded. Jack took off his heavy work jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She flinched at first, then seemed to understand the gesture was meant to help. As he guided her toward the F-150, he noticed her feet were cut and bruised. She'd been walking for miles. Inside the cab, warm air from the heater enveloped them both. Jack turned the temperature higher and handed her a clean shop rag to dry her hair. The woman sat rigidly in the passenger seat, staring out at the darkness as if the landscape held answers she desperately needed but couldn't reach. "I'm Jack," he said as he pulled back onto the highway. "Can you write your name?" She took the pen he offered and wrote on a napkin in shaky letters, "I don't know." Jack's jaw tightened. Whatever had happened to this woman, it was serious. As they drove toward Cedar Falls, he occasionally glanced over at her. She hadn't moved from her rigid posture, hands folded tightly in her lap. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It felt protective, like she was gathering strength from the warmth and safety of the F-150. 20 minutes later, they pulled into the gravel driveway of Jack's modest two-story house. Warm light glowed from the living room windows, and he could see Jessica curled up on the couch with a book and a bowl of cereal. Home. Safe. Exactly what this stranger needed. "We'll take it slow," Jack said as he turned off the engine. "You can rest here tonight and in the morning we'll figure out next steps. Sound okay?" The woman turned to him and for the first time, something resembling relief flickered in her eyes. She wrote on the napkin, "Thank you." Jack helped her up the front steps, noting how she moved carefully like someone relearning how to walk. The porch light illuminated the cuts on her feet more clearly, definitely from walking on rough terrain for an extended period. "Dad." Jessica appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair in messy pigtails and wearing her favorite dinosaur pajamas. Her blue eyes went wide as she took in the scene. "Hey Bug," Jack said, kneeling down to her level. "This lady needs our help tonight. She can't talk right now, but she's going to stay in the guest room, okay?" Jessica studied the woman with the intense curiosity unique to 10-year-olds. "What's her name?" "We're still figuring that out," Jack said carefully. "Why don't you grab some of those warm socks from the laundry basket? Her feet are pretty cold." As Jessica bounded off, Jack guided the woman into the living room. The house was modest but clean, with mismatched furniture that spoke of a single father doing his best. Family photos lined the mantel. Jack and Jessica at various ages, camping trips, birthday parties, everyday moments that spoke of love and stability. The woman's eyes lingered on the photos and she pointed to one of Jessica learning to ride a bike. She made a questioning gesture. "That's my daughter, Jessica," Jack explained. "It's just been the two of us for about 3 years now." He didn't elaborate, but something in his tone suggested loss. Jessica returned with thick wool socks and a shy smile. "These are really warm," she said, offering them to the woman. "And they're purple, which is the best color." The woman accepted the socks with what might have been a smile. She wrote on her napkin, "Beautiful daughter." "Yeah, she is," Jack said, ruffling Jessica's hair. "And she's got school tomorrow, so it's bedtime for you, Bug." After tucking Jessica in and answering her whispered questions about their unexpected guest, Jack returned to find the woman examining the books on his shelf. She'd found a pen and paper and had written, "You read to her?" "Every night since she was little," Jack nodded. "Stories are important." The woman wrote, "My head, it's like fog. But stories feel familiar." Jack's heart ached for her. Memory can be tricky after trauma. We'll take it one day at a time. He showed her to the guest room, a small space with a quilted bed and a window overlooking the backyard where Jessica's swing set stood silhouetted against the night sky. On the nightstand was a glass of water and some of Jessica's books. "Jessica thought you might like these," Jack explained. "She said reading helps when you can't sleep." The woman picked up one of the books, a collection of fairy tales, and something flickered across her face. Not quite recognition but familiarity. She wrote, "She's kind. Gets that from her mom," Jack said quietly. Then realizing how that sounded, he added, "Jessica's mom died when she was 7. It's been just us since then." The woman looked at him with new understanding. She wrote, "I'm sorry. Loss is hard." There was something in the way she wrote it that made Jack suspect she knew about loss too, even if she couldn't remember the specifics. "The bathroom's right across the hall," he said. "There are clean towels and some of Jessica's old clothes that might fit you. Tomorrow we'll figure out the next steps, but tonight you're safe." As he turned to leave, she touched his arm gently and wrote, "Why are you helping me?" Jack considered the question. "Because 3 years ago when Jessica and I were at our lowest point, people helped us. It's what you do." That night, Jack lay awake listening to the house settle around them. Down the hall, their guest was safe and warm. Tomorrow would bring questions, phone calls to authorities, and the complex process of helping someone piece their life back together. But tonight, it was enough that she was no longer standing alone in the rain. Through his window, he could see the storm clearing, revealing stars scattered across the Montana sky like scattered promises. Sometimes he thought the best thing you can do is simply open your door when someone needs shelter. Everything else would work itself out. Morning came with crisp November sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows. Jack was already dressed and making pancakes when he heard soft footsteps on the stairs. The woman appeared in the doorway wearing Jessica's oversized sweater and a pair of jeans that were slightly too short but clean. Her hair was brushed back, revealing a face that looked younger and somehow more fragile in the daylight. "Morning," Jack said gently, flipping a pancake with practiced ease. "Coffee." She nodded and wrote on a pad he'd left on the counter, "Thank you for everything." "Jessica will be down in a minute," Jack said, pouring coffee into a mug. "She's excited to show you her rock collection before school." The woman smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. She wrote, "She reminds me of someone, but I can't remember who." Jack's chest tightened. "We'll figure it out. I called the county sheriff this morning. Deputy Martinez is coming by after she drops Jessica at school." She handles missing persons cases. The woman's hand froze over the paper. Then she wrote quickly, police. Just to help, Jack assured her. To see if anyone's reported you missing, check hospitals, that sort of thing. Martinez is good people, she helped us when... He trailed off, then continued, when Jessica's mom was sick and we needed resources. Jessica bounded into the kitchen, backpack bouncing. Good morning, she said cheerfully to their guest. Dad makes the best pancakes in Montana. Well, probably. I haven't tried all the pancakes in Montana, but these are really good. The woman wrote, I bet they are, and showed it to Jessica. You can't talk? Jessica asked with the direct curiosity of a child. The woman shook her head, pointing to her throat. That's okay, Jessica said pragmatically. My friend Tommy's dad can't hear, so he uses his hands to talk. Maybe you could learn that too. Jack watched as the woman's eyes filled with tears. Not sad tears, but something warmer. She wrote, You're very wise, Jessica. After Jessica left for school with promises to show her rock collection later, Deputy Martinez arrived. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that somehow managed to be both professional and reassuring. So you found her on Highway 87? Martinez asked, reviewing her notes. About 20 miles outside town, Jack confirmed. She'd been walking for miles by the look of her feet. Martinez turned to the woman who had been following the conversation intently. I need to ask you some questions. I know you can't speak, but writing works fine. Do you remember anything about how you got to that highway? The woman shook her head and wrote, Everything before yesterday is gone. No memory of your name, where you're from, family members? A headshake. Then she wrote, Sometimes I get flashes. Like looking through fog. But nothing clear. Martinez nodded sympathetically. Memory loss after trauma isn't uncommon. The good news is we ran your description through the missing persons database this morning, and there are no current matches in Montana or surrounding states. Jack frowned. Is that good news? It means whoever she is, either no one has reported her missing yet, or she's from far enough away that the report hasn't filtered through to us. Sometimes family members wait 48 hours before filing, especially if the person is an adult. The woman wrote, What if no one is looking for me? Then we'll figure out what comes next, Martinez said firmly. But let's not jump to that conclusion yet. I want to try something. She pulled out a tablet and opened an app. This is called guided memory recovery. Sometimes specific prompts can help unlock things that trauma has blocked. Are you willing to try? The woman nodded. Close your eyes and just let whatever comes to mind flow through you. Don't force it. I'm going to say some words, and if anything, any image, feeling, or thought comes up, write it down, even if it doesn't make sense. The woman closed her eyes. Martinez began. Home. Family. Birthday. Music. Garden. Books. After music, the woman's hands started moving. She wrote, Piano. Someone playing badly but laughing. Good, Martinez encouraged. Keep going. Friends. Work. Travel. Nothing for those. Then Martinez said, Special places. Favorite places. Somewhere you felt safe. The woman's pencil moved again. Stone fountain. Counting ripples. Big house. Jack and Martinez exchanged glances. Can you draw it? Martinez asked. The woman opened her eyes and began sketching. Her hand moved with surprising confidence, creating the outline of an elaborate fountain with detailed stonework. Above it, she drew the suggestion of a large building with multiple windows and what looked like columns. This is excellent, Martinez said. This kind of architectural detail suggests familiarity. You've spent significant time at this place. Jack, does this look familiar to you? Jack studied the drawing. The fountain design, there's something about it. Jessica and I drove past some old estates up in the hills last summer when we were looking for camping spots. Some of those old places had fountains like this. I'll run this through our architectural database, Martinez said. Sometimes historical societies have records of distinctive features like this. In the meantime, she turned to the woman. Do you feel safe staying here with Jack and Jessica? The woman wrote without hesitation, Yes. They saved me. 3 days passed in a comfortable routine. The woman, whom Jessica had started calling Elle because it sounds pretty and mysterious, helped around the house with quiet efficiency. She couldn't speak, but she communicated through notes, gestures, and increasingly frequent smiles. Jack found himself looking forward to their silent conversations over coffee each morning while Jessica got ready for school. On Thursday evening, Jessica was showing Elle her rock collection when she noticed something that made her gasp. Elle, you have a tattoo. Jack looked up from where he was grading some of Jessica's homework. Elle had been reaching for a high shelf, and the sleeve of her borrowed sweater had ridden up, revealing marks on her shoulder. Elle quickly pulled the sleeve down, but Jessica's curiosity was already piqued. Can I see it? My friend's mom has a butterfly tee. Is yours a butterfly? Elle hesitated, then slowly pushed the sleeve up. On her shoulder was a delicate tattoo in flowing script. Jack stood to get a better look and his breath caught. The tattoo read, Elizabeth Cooper, June 15, 1992, love always. Elizabeth, Jessica breathed. That's your real name. Elle, Elizabeth, stared at her own shoulder as if seeing the tattoo for the first time. She touched it gently, then wrote on her ever-present notepad, I remember getting this. My 18th birthday. But I can't remember why. Jack's mind was already racing. Elizabeth Cooper. That's something to work with. And a birth date, that makes you 31. He paused. Do you mind if I look that up? Elizabeth nodded, though her expression was uncertain. Jack opened his laptop and typed, Elizabeth Cooper into the Google. Immediately, several results appeared, but one made him stop scrolling. Cedar Falls Gazette 2015, he read aloud. Local family faces tragedy as estate falls into legal dispute. Elizabeth leaned closer as Jack clicked the link. The article featured a photo of a grand estate with distinctive architecture, including a stone fountain that was unmistakably the same one Elizabeth had drawn days earlier. Ravenswood Manor, Jack read. Historic estate owned by the Cooper family for 3 generations. Following the death of Robert Cooper in 2013 and his wife Margaret's battle with cancer, the estate has become the center of a legal dispute between remaining family members and business partners over property rights and debts. Elizabeth's hand trembled as she wrote, I know that place. I can see it clearly now. I used to sit there and count the ripples when I dropped stones. Jack continued reading. The estate is currently managed by a trust while legal proceedings continue. The Cooper family's only surviving child, Elizabeth Cooper, has been reportedly estranged from the family business for several years and could not be reached for comment. That's you, Jessica said with certainty. You're the surviving child. But Elizabeth was shaking her head frantically. She wrote, I don't understand. If that's my family's house, why don't I remember them? And why was I walking on a highway miles from here? Jack found another article from 2016. Elizabeth Cooper reported missing after failing to appear for court hearing. His voice grew quieter as he read, Elizabeth Cooper, 24, failed to appear for a crucial court hearing regarding the Ravenswood Manor estate. Family attorney James Peterson reported that Cooper had been staying at a private facility for treatment of severe anxiety and depression following her parents' deaths, but she left the facility 3 weeks ago and has not been in contact with legal representatives. That was 5 years ago, Jack said carefully. Elizabeth. This article is from 2016. Elizabeth wrote with shaking hands, 5 years? What happened to me for 5 years? Jessica, with the straightforward logic of a child, said, maybe we should go to that big house. Maybe seeing it will help you remember. Jack looked at Elizabeth. Do you want to try that? We don't have to, but if seeing the fountain triggered some memory. Elizabeth stared at the photos on the screen for a long moment. The house looked simultaneously familiar and foreign to her, like a half-remembered dream. Finally she wrote, I'm scared. But I think I need to know. That evening, while Jessica did her homework, Jack and Elizabeth sat on the porch swing, wrapped in blankets against the November chill. The stars above Montana were brilliant and clear, and Elizabeth kept glancing up at them as if they too held memories just out of reach. She wrote on her pad, Thank you for not just taking me to a hospital or police station that first night. You looked like someone who'd been failed by systems before, Jack said quietly. Sometimes people need a safe place to figure things out on their own timeline. Elizabeth wrote, Jessica is lucky to have you. We're both lucky to have each other, Jack replied. And I think we're both lucky you found us. As they sat in comfortable silence, neither of them noticed the dark sedan that drove slowly past the house, or the way it paused just long enough for someone inside to take note of the address. Saturday morning arrived gray and misty, with low clouds clinging to the Montana hills like secrets reluctant to be revealed. Elizabeth had slept poorly, plagued by dreams of stone corridors and voices she couldn't quite identify. Over breakfast she wrote to Jack, "I keep hearing piano music in my dreams. Someone playing the same song over and over, but I can't remember the melody when I wake up. Maybe visiting Ravenswood will help," Jessica suggested, spreading peanut butter on her toast with the careful precision of a 10-year-old. "Sometimes when I can't remember where I put something I have to go back to where I last saw it." An hour later they were driving through the winding roads that led into the hills above Cedar Falls. The landscape grew more rugged as they climbed, pine trees giving way to bare aspens whose golden leaves carpeted the ground. Elizabeth sat tensely in the passenger seat, her notebook clutched in her hands. "There," Jack said, pointing ahead. Ravenswood Manor emerged from behind a stand of trees like something from another era. The wrought iron gates stood slightly ajar, rust visible along their elaborate scrollwork. Beyond them, a circular drive led to a 3-story stone mansion with Gothic Revival architecture. Tall windows stared out like empty eyes, and ivy had begun to claim the walls, though it was brown and dormant now in the late fall. "It's bigger than I imagined," Jack murmured, parking the F-150 outside the gates. Elizabeth was staring at the building with an expression that was part recognition, part terror. She wrote, "I can smell the roses. But there are no roses." They walked through the gates, their footsteps loud on the gravel drive. The fountain at the center was dry and filled with fallen leaves, but its elaborate stonework was exactly as Elizabeth had drawn it. She approached it slowly, running her fingers along the carved edges. "I dropped pennies here," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack and Jessica both froze. Those were the first words Elizabeth had spoken since they'd found her. "Eh?" Jessica exclaimed. "You can talk." Elizabeth looked as surprised as they were. She touched her throat tentatively, then said, I made wishes. Every penny was a wish that." She stopped, frustration crossing her face. "I can't remember what I wished for." "It's okay," Jack said gently. "The memories are coming back. Let's keep going." They approached the house itself. The front door was locked, but Jack found a side entrance that had been left open. Inside the air was musty and thick with dust. Sheet-covered furniture created ghostly shapes in the dim light filtering through dirty windows. Elizabeth moved through the rooms with increasing confidence, as if her feet remembered the path even when her mind didn't. She led them to a grand staircase with an ornate banister, then turned left into what had once been a music room. In the corner sat a baby grand piano, its black surface dulled with neglect. Elizabeth approached it with reverence, lifting the dust cover with trembling hands. She sat on the bench and tentatively touched the keys. The sound was tinny and out of tune, but unmistakably a piano. "Hi, Father," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He played so badly, but he loved it. He said music was the language of the heart, even when your fingers couldn't find the right notes." Her hands found a melody, halting at first, then with growing confidence. It was a simple tune, sweet and melancholy, the kind of song a parent might write for a child. "He wrote this for me," Elizabeth said, her voice growing stronger. "For my 8th birthday. He called it Elizabeth's Song." Elizabeth looked as surprised as they were. She touched her throat tentatively, then said, I made wishes. Every penny was a wish that." She stopped, frustration crossing her face. "I can't remember what I wished for." "It's okay," Jack said gently. "The memories are coming back. Let's keep going." They approached the house itself. The front door was locked, but Jack found a side entrance that had been left open. Inside the air was musty and thick with dust. Sheet-covered furniture created ghostly shapes in the dim light filtering through dirty windows. Elizabeth moved through the rooms with increasing confidence, as if her feet remembered the path even when her mind didn't. She led them to a grand staircase with an ornate banister, then turned left into what had once been a music room. In the corner sat a baby grand piano, its black surface dulled with neglect. Elizabeth approached it with reverence, lifting the dust cover with trembling hands. She sat on the bench and tentatively touched the keys. The sound was tinny and out of tune but unmistakably a piano. "Hi, Father," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He played so badly but he loved it. He said music was the language of the heart, even when your fingers couldn't find the right notes." Her hands found a melody, halting at first then with growing confidence. It was a simple tune, sweet and melancholy, the kind of song a parent might write for a child. "He wrote this for me," Elizabeth said, her voice growing stronger. "For my 8th birthday. He called it Elizabeth's Song." Jessica sat beside her on the bench. "It's beautiful. He used to say I was his greatest composition," Elizabeth continued, the words flowing now as if a dam had burst. "Even though he could barely play. He said someday I'd understand that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real." Jack stood behind them, watching Elizabeth's face transform as memories returned. "What else do you remember?" Elizabeth's hands stilled on the keys. "The fights. Loud voices from his office. Men in expensive suits who made my mother cry. She used to say they were trying to take our home away but I was too young to understand." She stood from the piano and walked to a door at the far end of the room. It opened onto a study lined with books and dominated by a large desk. Papers were scattered across its surface, some yellowed with age. "This was his sanctuary," Elizabeth said, touching the leather desk chair. "But near the end it became his prison. He spent all his time in here fighting to save the estate, save the business, save." She paused, pain flickering across her face. "Save me." "Save you from what?" Jack asked gently. Elizabeth picked up one of the papers from the desk, a letter with a law firm's letterhead. As she read, her face went pale. "The trust," she whispered. "After my parents died, the estate was supposed to come to me, but there were conditions. I had to be stable, mentally fit. The business partners convinced a judge that I wasn't capable of managing the inheritance." She sank into the desk chair, looking suddenly small and vulnerable. "I remember now. The facility they mentioned in the article. It wasn't for treatment, it was to keep me away from the estate while they found ways to claim it for themselves." "That's why you ran," Jack realized. "You escaped." "But I don't remember how I got from there to that highway," Elizabeth said, frustration creeping back into her voice. "It's like there's still a piece missing." Jessica, who had been quietly exploring the room, spoke up from near a bookshelf. "Al, there's a picture here." She held up a silver frame containing a family photo. A younger Elizabeth with a tall man with kind eyes and a woman with Elizabeth's same brown hair. They were standing in front of the fountain, all three of them laughing at something outside the camera's view. Elizabeth took the photo with shaking hands. "I remember this day. It was my 16th birthday. Dad had just told me the worst joke in the world and Mom was laughing so hard she snorted, which made us all laugh even harder." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "They loved me so much. How did I forget that?" "Trauma can bury good memories along with bad ones," Jack said softly. "But they're still there. You just needed the right key to unlock them." As they prepared to leave Ravenswood, Elizabeth stopped at the fountain one more time. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a penny Jessica had given her earlier. A lucky penny the little girl always carried. "What are you wishing for?" Jessica asked. Elizabeth closed her eyes, made her wish, and dropped the penny into the dry fountain. "For the truth," she said. "Whatever it costs." Neither Jack nor Elizabeth noticed the figure watching them from the tree line, or the phone call that was made as soon as they drove away. Monday morning brought more than just the usual routine. As Jack was getting Jessica ready for school, Elizabeth sat at the kitchen table composing what would be her first public statement in 5 years. Her voice had returned fully now, growing stronger with each recovered memory, and she'd decided it was time to tell her story. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Jack asked, looking over her shoulder at the notes she'd been writing. "Once you go public, there's no taking it back." "I've been hiding for 5 years, Elizabeth replied, her voice steady despite the gravity of what she was about to do. It's time people knew what really happened to Elizabeth Cooper. That afternoon, they drove to the offices of KCFL, Cedar Falls local radio station. The station manager, Maria Santos, had been a friend of Jack's late wife and had agreed to let Elizabeth tell her story without interference. "We'll go live in 10 minutes, Maria said, adjusting Elizabeth's microphone. "Remember, you control this interview. If you need to stop, just say so." Jack sat in the control room with Jessica, who had insisted on coming after school. "Dad, Al looks nervous," Jessica observed. "She's very brave," Jack replied, though his own heart was racing. Something about this felt risky, exposing Elizabeth before they fully understood what had happened to her. The on-air light flickered to life and Maria's warm voice filled the studio. "Good afternoon, Cedar Falls. This is Maria Santos with a special broadcast. With me today is a woman whose story has been shrouded in mystery for 5 years. Elizabeth Cooper, welcome." "Thank you, Maria," Elizabeth said, her voice only slightly trembling. "For our listeners who might not be familiar with your story, can you tell us who you are?" Elizabeth took a deep breath. "I'm the daughter of Robert and Margaret Cooper, the former owners of Ravenswood Manor. 5 years ago, I disappeared under circumstances that I'm only now beginning to understand." As Elizabeth began recounting her story, the memory loss, being found on the highway, the gradual return of her memories, Jack watched through the control room window, proud of her courage. "You mentioned that you believe your disappearance wasn't voluntary," Maria prompted. "Can you elaborate on that?" "After my parents died, their business partners used my grief and trauma against me," Elizabeth said, her voice growing stronger. "They had me declared mentally incompetent and placed in a facility against my will. I escaped, but I believe something happened to me during that escape, something that caused my memory loss." In the control room, Jessica tugged on Jack's sleeve. "Dad, there are cars outside." Jack looked through the window and felt his stomach drop. 3 black sedans had pulled into the parking lot, and men in suits were stepping out. One of them was speaking urgently into a phone. "Elizabeth," Jack said into his headset microphone, "we need to wrap this up. Now." But Elizabeth was deep into her story now, years of suppressed truth pouring out. "The facility where they held me was called Peaceful Meadows, but there was nothing peaceful about it. They were dosing me with medications that made it impossible to think clearly, to fight back. I don't remember how I escaped, but I know I was running from them when..." The studio door burst open. The men in suits strode in, led by a tall man with silver hair and cold eyes. Behind them came 2 security guards from the facility. "Miss Cooper," the silver-haired man said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I'm Dr. Harrison Webb from Peaceful Meadows Treatment Center. You've missed several appointments." Elizabeth's face went white, but she didn't move from her chair. "This is a live radio broadcast, Dr. Webb. Listeners across Cedar Falls are hearing every word you say. Miss Cooper is a patient with severe dissociative episodes," Dr. Webb said, speaking directly to Maria. "She's not competent to make decisions about her care. We have legal guardianship." "Show me the paperwork," Jack said, stepping into the studio with Jessica close behind him. Dr. Webb's eyes narrowed as he took in Jack and Jessica. "And you are?" "The family she's been staying with," Jack replied firmly. "The family that found her abandoned on a highway and gave her the care and respect she deserved." "Dad," Jessica whispered, sensing the tension. Dr. Webb gestured to one of his security guards, who stepped forward with a folder. "Court order granting Peaceful Meadows temporary guardianship pending Miss Cooper's return to care." Elizabeth stood slowly, her hand finding Jack's. "Maria, are we still live?" "We are," Maria confirmed, her own voice tight with tension. "Then I want everyone listening to know this," Elizabeth said, turning to face Dr. Webb. "I am not mentally ill. I was never mentally ill. I was inconvenient. My inheritance was inconvenient. My questions about my parents' deaths were inconvenient. So they made me disappear." "Miss Cooper, you're having another episode," Dr. Webb said smoothly. "Come with us voluntarily and we can discuss this calmly back at the facility." "No," Elizabeth said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere." Jack stepped between Elizabeth and the security guards. "She's an adult. She has the right to refuse treatment." "Not according to this court order," Dr. Webb replied, nodding to his men. As the security guards moved forward, Jessica did something that surprised everyone. She stepped in front of Elizabeth and said in her clear 10-year-old voice, She's not crazy. She's just been hurt. And you're the ones who hurt her. The simple honesty of a child's words, broadcast live across Cedar Falls, seemed to freeze everyone in the room. You heard her, Cedar Falls, Maria said into her microphone. A little girl can see what's happening here. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Through the studio windows, Jack could see more cars arriving, but these weren't more security. They were local police responding to calls from listeners who had heard the broadcast. Sheriff Martinez herself was striding toward the building. Dr. Webb must have seen them too because his confident demeanor began to crack. This isn't over, Miss Cooper. You can't run from your legal obligations forever. I'm not running, Elizabeth replied, her voice steady and strong. I'm fighting back. And this time I'm not fighting alone. As Sheriff Martinez entered the studio, Elizabeth looked directly into the radio microphone. If anyone is listening who works at Peaceful Meadows or who knows what really happened to me during those missing years, please come forward. It's time for the truth. The battle for Elizabeth Cooper's freedom had only just begun. The confrontation at the radio station had lasted hours, with Sheriff Martinez ultimately requiring Dr. Webb and his team to produce more substantial documentation before attempting to remove Elizabeth. In the end, they had retreated, but not before making it clear that this was far from over. Now, 2 days later, Jack's house had become an unofficial headquarters for uncovering the truth about Elizabeth's missing years. The dining room table was covered with documents, newspaper clippings, and printouts that painted a disturbing picture of systematic manipulation and cover-ups. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. James Peterson, the Cooper family's former attorney, arrived at Jack's house Wednesday evening carrying a worn leather briefcase and the weight of 5 years of guilt on his shoulders. He was a man in his 60s with tired eyes and the careful posture of someone who had been looking over his shoulder for too long. I should have come forward years ago, he said, accepting the cup of coffee Jack offered. But I was scared. They made it very clear what would happen to anyone who interfered with their plans. Elizabeth sat across from him at the kitchen table, Jessica beside her working on homework but clearly listening to every word. What plans, Mr. Peterson? Peterson opened his briefcase with trembling hands and pulled out a manila folder. Before your mother died, she gave me this. She made me promise to keep it safe until you came back. He handed Elizabeth a printed email dated March 15, 2016. Elizabeth's hands shook as she read her mother's final words. My dearest Elizabeth, if you are reading this, it means the worst has happened and I am no longer here to protect you. I pray that you have found your way back to safety and that someone trustworthy is helping you uncover the truth. Your father's business partners, Richard Blackwood, Dr. Harrison Webb and the Meridian Group, have been systematically stealing from the Cooper estate for years. When your father discovered their embezzlement, they had him murdered. The heart attack was induced. I have proof hidden in the old oak tree behind the fountain at Ravenswood. They know I suspect them, which is why they are pressuring me to sign papers giving them control of your inheritance for your own good. They claim you are mentally unstable, but we both know that's a lie designed to keep you from claiming what is rightfully yours. I have arranged for our old friend Sarah Chin to help you disappear until it's safe to return. Trust no one else. The corruption goes deeper than we imagined. Even some local authorities are involved. I love you more than words can express. Your father loved you too. We tried to protect you but we ran out of time. Now you must protect yourself. Find the evidence. Expose them. And live the life we dreamed for you. All my love, Mom. Elizabeth finished reading with tears streaming down her face. Sarah Chin. I remember her now. She was Mom's college roommate. She worked for some kind of victim protection agency. The Underground Railroad for Abuse Survivors, Peterson confirmed. Your mother contacted her when things started getting dangerous. Sarah was supposed to keep you safe for just a few weeks while your mother gathered evidence to expose the conspiracy. But Mom died before she could finish, Elizabeth whispered. Heart attack just like your father, Peterson said grimly. Except your mother was 38 years old with no history of heart problems. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. They killed both her parents? And when Elizabeth tried to return for the funeral, Sarah convinced her it wasn't safe. They went into deeper hiding. But something went wrong. Elizabeth closed her eyes, concentrating. I remember being in a cabin somewhere remote. Sarah was teaching me how to change my appearance, create new identification. But then, she pressed her fingers to her temples. Men came in the night. There was fighting. Sarah told me to run. The men who took you to the facility, Peterson said. They found Sarah's safe house. What happened to Sarah? Elizabeth asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. Car accident 2 days later, Peterson replied quietly. Single vehicle, late at night, no witnesses. The room fell silent except for the scratch of Jessica's pencil as she worked on her math homework, seemingly oblivious to the gravity of what they were discussing. There's more, Peterson continued. The evidence your mother mentioned, I helped her hide it. Not just financial records but recordings. Your father had been secretly recording his meetings with the Meridian Group for months before he died. Elizabeth looked up sharply. Recordings of what? Them admitting to the embezzlement. Discussing how to eliminate obstacles to their takeover. Your father was building a case against them when they had him killed. Jack stood and began pacing. So Elizabeth's parents hid evidence that could bring down this entire conspiracy, but Elizabeth was supposed to stay hidden until it was safe to use it. Except the people protecting her were systematically eliminated, Peterson finished. By the time Elizabeth escaped from Peaceful Meadows, she was completely alone with no memory of where the evidence was hidden. But I remember now, Elizabeth said suddenly. The oak tree behind the fountain. Mom and I used to hide treasures there when I was little. We called it our secret vault. Jessica looked up from her homework. Like a pirate treasure? Exactly like that, Elizabeth smiled, though her eyes remained serious. Peterson leaned forward. Elizabeth, retrieving that evidence will be dangerous. If they realize what you're doing. They've already shown their hand, Jack interrupted. That scene at the radio station proved they're desperate. If we're going to move, it has to be now before they regroup. Elizabeth stood, her decision made. Mr. Peterson, will you help us? The elderly lawyer studied her face, seeing not the traumatized young woman who had disappeared 5 years ago, but the determined adult she had become. Your parents would be proud of who you've become, Elizabeth. Yes, I'll help you. As they began planning their return to Ravenswood Manor, none of them noticed the listening device that had been planted in Jack's house during the chaos of the radio station incident. Miles away, in a sleek office building, Richard Blackwood ended his recording session and reached for his phone. She remembers, he said to the person on the other end. And she knows about the evidence. We need to move tonight. Thursday morning arrived with an unexpected visitor. Jack was making breakfast when a convoy of black cars pulled into his driveway. But instead of Dr. Webb's security team, Sheriff Martinez stepped out, followed by 2 FBI agents in dark suits. This is Agent Sarah Reeves and Agent Michael Torres, Martinez said as Jack opened the door. They need to speak with Elizabeth immediately. Elizabeth appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed and alert. The past few days had transformed her. Gone was the confused, frightened woman Jack had found on the highway. In her place stood someone who looked ready for battle. Miss Cooper, Agent Reeves said, we understand you've recovered memories related to the Cooper estate case. We need you to come with us right now. Why? Elizabeth asked, not moving from the stairs. Agent Torres stepped forward. Because Richard Blackwood and the Meridian Group have accelerated their timeline. We have evidence they're planning to destroy the materials hidden at Ravenswood Manor this morning. Elizabeth descended the stairs slowly. How do you know about the hidden evidence? Because we've been investigating the Meridian Group for 2 years, Agent Reeves explained. Your parents weren't their first victims. They've been using similar tactics across the region, targeting wealthy families in crisis, manipulating legal systems and eliminating anyone who threatened their operations. Jack felt his protective instincts flare. If you've been investigating them for 2 years, why didn't you help Elizabeth before now? Because we didn't know she was alive, Agent Torres admitted. The official records showed Elizabeth Cooper died in a car accident 18 months ago. We thought we'd lost our best witness. Elizabeth's face went white. They declared me dead? Legally, yes. Which means they've been operating as if the Cooper inheritance was permanently unclaimed, Agent Reeves said. Your radio broadcast 3 days ago was the first indication that you had survived. And it forced them to act, Sheriff Martinez added grimly. We intercepted communications indicating they're moving to eliminate the evidence today, before you can retrieve it. Jessica appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas. Eh? What's happening? Elizabeth knelt down to Jessica's level. I have to go get something that belonged to my parents. Something very important. Is it dangerous? Jessica asked with the directness of a child. It might be, Elizabeth admitted. But sometimes you have to face dangerous things to protect the people you love. Jessica hugged her tightly. Then you should go. But come back safe, okay? 20 minutes later, they were racing through the Montana hills in a convoy of federal vehicles. Elizabeth sat in the back of an FBI SUV, watching the familiar landscape blur past. Agent Reeves was briefing her on what they expected to find. The oak tree your mother mentioned. Our aerial surveillance shows recent disturbance around the base. Someone's been digging there. They found it? Elizabeth asked, her heart sinking. We don't think so. The digging appears random, like they're searching without knowing the exact location. Your specific knowledge of the hiding spot gives us an advantage. As they crested the hill approaching Ravenswood Manor, Elizabeth could see vehicles already at the estate. Black SUVs were parked near the fountain, and figures moved around the oak tree with metal detectors and shovels. There, Elizabeth pointed. The largest oak about 50 feet behind the fountain. The hiding spot is on the side facing the house, where the roots form a natural hollow. Agent Torres spoke into his radio. All units, we have visual confirmation of the targets. Move to surround and contain. The next few minutes unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. FBI agents emerged from the tree line while others blocked the estate's exit points. Elizabeth watched from the SUV as Richard Blackwood, a man she now remembered visiting her father's office many times, was taken into custody along with several other men in expensive suits. Miss Cooper, Agent Reeves said, we need you to show us the exact location. Elizabeth approached the oak tree with trembling hands. The men had been digging in the wrong spot, tearing up the ground around the base but missing the specific location her mother had described. Elizabeth walked to the side facing the house and knelt beside a particular configuration of roots. Here, she said, brushing away leaves and soil. Mom and I carved our initials here when I was 8. Sure enough, barely visible in the bark, were the letters EC plus MC inside a heart. Elizabeth began digging with her hands until she hit something solid. A waterproof container about the size of a shoebox. Inside were thumb drives, financial documents, and a small digital recorder. Elizabeth turned on the recorder and her father's voice filled the air, clear and strong despite being 5 years old. March 10, 2016. Recording number 15. Richard Blackwood just left my office after threatening my family directly. He said if I don't sign over power of attorney to the Meridian Group, they'll have me declared incompetent like they did to the Morrison family last year. Elizabeth looked up at Agent Reeves with tears in her eyes. This is it. This is everything. But their moment of triumph was interrupted by the sound of approaching helicopters. 3 aircraft descended toward the estate, and Elizabeth's blood ran cold as she recognized Dr. Webb stepping out of the lead helicopter, flanked by armed men who were definitely not law enforcement. Federal agents. Agent Torres shouted into his radio. We have hostile forces incoming. Elizabeth. Dr. Webb's voice carried across the grounds through a megaphone. You have something that doesn't belong to you. Return it now and no one gets hurt. Agent Reeves pulled Elizabeth behind the oak tree as the first shots rang out. Stay down. We've got backup coming. Elizabeth clutched the evidence container to her chest. After 5 years of running, hiding, and forgetting, she finally had the proof that could bring justice for her parents and freedom for herself. She wasn't about to let Dr. Webb and his cronies take it away now. Agent Reeves, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them, whatever happens, this evidence has to make it to court. It will, the agent promised. But first we all have to make it out of here alive. The standoff at Ravenswood Manor lasted 3 hours, but it felt like a lifetime. Elizabeth crouched behind the oak tree, clutching the evidence that had cost her parents their lives, while FBI agents and Dr. Webb's mercenaries exchanged gunfire across the estate grounds. The turning point came when Sheriff Martinez arrived with reinforcements. Not just local police, but Montana state troopers and a federal tactical team that had been monitoring the situation. Dr. Webb's hired guns, realizing they were vastly outnumbered, began surrendering one by one. Elizabeth watched from her hiding spot as Dr. Webb himself was taken into custody, his confident demeanor finally cracking as Agent Reeves read him his rights. "This isn't over, Miss Cooper," he shouted as they led him to a police car. "You can't undo 5 years with a few old recordings." But Elizabeth knew better. The evidence they'd recovered wasn't just recordings. It was financial documents showing years of systematic theft, communications proving conspiracy, and most damning of all, a recording of Richard Blackwood explicitly discussing the plan to eliminate Robert and Margaret Cooper. 6 months later, Elizabeth stood in a federal courthouse watching as the last member of the Meridian Group was sentenced to life in prison. The conspiracy had been even larger than anyone imagined, involving corrupt officials across 3 states and resulting in the deaths of at least 7 people who had threatened their operations. But for Elizabeth, the real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the quiet moments that followed, building a new life in Cedar Falls with the family that had saved her. The first step had been the hardest, walking into the Cedar Falls courthouse to legally change her name. Not back to Elizabeth Cooper, that name carried too much pain and too many targets, but to Elizabeth Morrison, taking Jack's surname and claiming her place in the family that had chosen her. "It feels right," she told Jack as they walked out of the courthouse, Jessica skipping between them. Elizabeth Cooper was a victim. Elizabeth Morrison is a survivor. The second step was using her restored inheritance to establish the Cooper Legacy Foundation, headquartered in a renovated community center on the outskirts of Cedar Falls. The foundation's mission was simple: providing safe houses and legal support for people fleeing dangerous situations, ensuring that no one would have to face what Elizabeth had endured. "We're opening our 3rd safe house next month," Elizabeth told the small crowd gathered for the foundation's first anniversary celebration. "And we've helped 47 families find safety and justice in the past year." From the audience, Jack watched his wife. They'd married in a simple ceremony 6 months ago, with pride and admiration. The frightened woman he'd found on that Montana highway had become a force for good in the world, turning her trauma into a tool for helping others. Jessica, now 11 and serving as the foundation's unofficial junior ambassador, stood up during the Q&A portion of the event. "I just want to say that Elizabeth, taught me that families aren't just people who are related to you. They're people who choose to love you and take care of you when you need it most." That evening, as the 3 of them sat on their porch watching the Montana sunset, Elizabeth reflected on how far they'd all come. Jack was reading one of his mechanical engineering journals while Jessica worked on a friendship bracelet, and Elizabeth was reviewing applications for the foundation's newest program. "Jack," she said suddenly, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just driven past that night? If you'd seen me on the highway and decided it wasn't your problem?" Jack looked up from his magazine. "Every day," he admitted. "And every day I'm grateful I didn't. Not just because of what you've become, but because of what we've become. All 3 of us." Jessica looked up from her bracelet. "Mom, you know what I think?" Elizabeth's heart still skipped a beat every time Jessica called her Mom, a title she'd started using naturally about 4 months after the wedding. "What do you think, sweetheart? I think you were supposed to find us that night. Like the universe put you exactly where you needed to be so we could all be a family." Elizabeth smiled, reaching over to tuck a strand of Jessica's blonde hair behind her ear. "You know what? I think you might be right." Later that night, after Jessica had gone to bed, Elizabeth stood in their bedroom looking at the photo on her nightstand, not the formal Cooper family portrait from Ravenswood, but a candid shot Jack had taken of her and Jessica making cookies, both of them covered in flour and laughing. She opened the small jewelry box beside it and pulled out 2 items: her mother's wedding ring, which had been returned to her with the rest of the Cooper estate, and a simple silver band Jack had given her. Not an engagement ring but a gratitude ring, as he'd called it, to remind her that she was cherished exactly as she was. She slipped both rings onto her finger and whispered to the photo of her parents that sat beside her bed, "I found my way home just like you always believed I would. And this time I'm never leaving." Outside their window, the lights of Cedar Falls twinkled like stars, and somewhere in the distance, A train whistle sang its lonely song across the Montana plains. But inside the Morrison house, there was only warmth, safety, and the quiet contentment of a family that had found each other against all odds. Spring arrived in Cedar Falls with an explosion of wildflowers and the kind of warm sunshine that made everything feel possible. Elizabeth stood on the porch of the Cooper Legacy Foundation's newest facility, watching as their first group of children participated in an art therapy session on the lawn. These were kids who had been through trauma similar to her own. Some had lost parents, others had been separated from their families by dangerous circumstances, and all of them were learning that they weren't alone. "The playground equipment gets installed next week," Jack said, joining her with 2 cups of coffee. After a year of marriage, he'd become not just her husband but her true partner in running the foundation. "And the greenhouse should be finished by summer," Elizabeth added, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Jessica's so excited about teaching the kids how to grow their own vegetables." They watched as their daughter, because that's what Jessica truly was now, legally and in every way that mattered, led a group of younger children in a game that seemed to involve a lot of giggling and running in circles. "She's amazing with them," Jack observed. "Takes after her mom." Elizabeth felt the familiar warmth that still surprised her when Jack spoke of her as Jessica's mother so naturally. The adoption had been finalized 6 months ago, making official what had been true in their hearts from the beginning. "The dedication ceremony starts in an hour," Elizabeth said, checking her watch. "Are you nervous? About speaking in front of a crowd?" "Terrified," Jack admitted. "About celebrating what we've built here? Never been more proud." The ceremony was everything Elizabeth had hoped it would be. The entire town of Cedar Falls seemed to have turned out, along with families they'd helped through the foundation and supporters who had traveled from across the state. But the moment that meant the most came when Jessica took the microphone to speak. "My family is different from a lot of families," Jessica began, her 11-year-old voice clear and confident. "My first mom died when I was little and my dad and I were really sad for a long time. But then Elizabeth found us. Well, technically Dad found her on the side of a road, but I think she found us in the way that really matters." Laughter rippled through the audience and Elizabeth felt tears prick her eyes. "Elizabeth taught me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared," Jessica continued. "It means you do the right thing even when you are scared. And she taught me that families can be born or they can be chosen, but the best families are both." She paused, looking directly at Elizabeth and Jack. "So I just want to say thank you, Mom, for choosing us. And thank you for teaching me that when someone needs help, you help them even if they're just a stranger on a dark road." The applause was thunderous, but Elizabeth barely heard it. She was thinking about another night almost 2 years ago, when she had indeed been a stranger on a dark road, broken and lost and convinced she had nothing left to live for. Now she had everything. A husband who loved her unconditionally, a daughter who called her mom with genuine affection, and a purpose that gave meaning to every day. The Cooper Legacy Foundation had grown beyond her wildest dreams, helping not just individuals but working to reform the systems that had failed her and so many others. That evening, after the last guest had gone home and the 3 of them had cleaned up the remnants of the celebration, they sat together on their porch swing. Jessica was nestled between Elizabeth and Jack, reading aloud from a book of poetry they'd been working through together. "Listen to this one," Jessica said, finding a page she'd bookmarked. "It's by Maya Angelou. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." Elizabeth exchanged a look with Jack over Jessica's head. Their daughter had unknowingly chosen a quote that perfectly captured Elizabeth's journey from silenced victim to powerful advocate. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Elizabeth said. "What do you think it means?" Jessica considered this seriously. "I think it means that everybody has important stories, and when we don't let people tell their stories, it hurts them. Like how you couldn't tell your story for a long time because the bad people were trying to keep you quiet." "And what changed that?" Jack prompted gently. "She found people who wanted to listen," Jessica said simply, "and who would fight for her right to tell her story." As the stars began to appear over Cedar Falls, Elizabeth reflected on the truth of her daughter's words. The real turning point in her journey hadn't been recovering her memories or finding the evidence or even seeing her tormentors brought to justice. It had been finding people who believed in her worth and fought for her right to exist safely in the world. "I love you both so much," she whispered, pulling them closer. "We love you too, Mom," Jessica said, already drowsy. Later, after they'd tucked Jessica into bed, Elizabeth and Jack stood together in their backyard, looking up at the vast Montana sky. In the distance, they could see the lights of the foundation building, where tomorrow more families would find the help and hope they needed. No regrets? Jack asked, as he did sometimes on quiet evenings like this. Elizabeth considered the question seriously. She thought about the years of pain and loss, the trauma and fear, the long journey back to herself. But she also thought about Jessica's laugh, Jack's steady presence, and the letters they received from families whose lives had been changed by the foundation's work. None, she said finally. Every dark moment led me here, to this family, to this purpose. I wouldn't change a single step of the journey. Jack kissed the top of her head. Then we're exactly where we're supposed to be. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the sky, a reminder that even in the darkest nights, there's always light to guide you home. What would you have done if you found someone lost and broken on the side of the road? Sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply choosing to stop and help, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's risky. Jack's decision to help Elizabeth that stormy night didn't just save one life. It created a family and launched a foundation that has helped dozens of other families find safety and hope. If this story moved you, please consider sharing it. There are people in your own community who might be one act of kindness away from finding their way home. And remember, sometimes the stranger who needs your help today might become the family you've been searching for tomorrow. Thank you for listening, for caring, and for believing that every story, no matter how broken it begins, has the potential for a beautiful ending.